welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening in what is Wycliffe's second forum. And so we're really hoping that over the next hour and a half that we will have some good discussion on how we can look after ourselves during the transition out of lockdown. We're about to move into our 15th or 16th week of restrictions due to COVID. It's all starting to blur a bit now as to how many weeks it is. And for all of us, it's been a really challenging time. God made us all with very different personalities. And we've all had different experiences in our lives, which means how we respond in lockdown and this current transitioning will be really varied. It's affected us all very differently. Some folks have really enjoyed having a new pattern to their life and new challenges. There's new opportunities to do things differently. And for others of us, actually it's been a time of real significant loss and difficulties. So it's important right at the beginning to acknowledge that it's okay for us to feel differently about issues compared to others. And we really hope that this evening will be an opportunity to reflect on this time of change and uncertainty. So I just want to give you a plan for the evening ahead. So shortly I'm going to introduce you to our panel of experts where they will share something about themselves and a little bit about how they have found lockdown, the challenges and the changes in their lives. After that, we'll have a short time of led reflection. And after that, we'll then move into a time where I'm going to ask each of the panel members some questions about the types of things that we can do during this time of transition to help look after ourselves. We really want this evening to be relevant to the issues that you have in your life at the moment. And so during the evening, if you have any questions that you would like the panel to answer, if you could use the chat function on the bottom of the screen, the little speech bubble, and click on that, and then you can type your question and send it to the Wycliffe Baptist Church. And then I can put your question to the panel later. Some of you might find it helpful to have a pen and paper ready, because I do know there'll probably be quite a lot of new information, and so you might want to jot things down, so feel free to quickly go and get a pen and paper. Anyway, after our 20-minute sort of question and answer session, we will then go into some breakout rooms, and in each of these groups we will have a chance to discuss some of the issues that have been raised over the evening, and opportunity to pray together. We're really wanting this evening to be an encouraging time for all of us as we listen to each other, hopefully learn some new things, and to share and pray together. So I'm going to now ask each panel member to introduce themselves and say how lockdown has been for them. So if we could start with Rachel, how has lockdown been for you?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm Director of Teaching for Psychology and Counselling at the Open University, and my time in lockdown has mostly been spent helping implement the changes the university have made to students' assessment because of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. Stu, how has lockdown been for you?
So, yeah, for those who don't know, I'm Stuart Weeks. In my day-to-day role, I'm an accountant in a firm of accountants. I'm a tax advisor. And one of the things we do is we help, we've got a team of 17 people in my team, a load more around the country. I'm trying to work with them and help them work through the challenges they face. Equally, I'm trustee of a charity. I'm trying to work out the impact it's been on charities and lack of income, and what that means going forward. And the third aspect is I'm a parent with Marisa of 4 teenagers, all one's almost a teenager, probably actual one. And it's trying to work with them and think, you know, homeschooling and A levels and GCSEs this year, those have gone to pot. What happens? What do we do? So challenges on different fronts.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sedge.
Hiya. So I'm a fitness instructor, and obviously taking everything online now. So that's been a challenge, especially at the beginning, not knowing how to do Zoom and microphones and all that type of stuff. And also my members, some of them quite a lot older, and some without internet, or lots of different challenges, whether I've had to send DVDs over to them or different stuff because they haven't got internet. Also 3 children, all sporty, dancing, so in every room in my house there's something different going on, and very challenging having 3 teenage boys back in the house when 2 of them actually, one boards, he's a 15-year-old and the other one's 18-year-old, lives away, and then having them all here. And also a friend had a hip operation just before lockdown and she moved in, which has actually been a wonderful, been brilliant to have adult company and just help with things. Yeah, help with things. Very grateful for God for equipping us together, and especially for making my business still continue with so many other businesses closing, especially in the fitness industry. So I'm extremely grateful.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Sedge. So finally, Malvine.
Hi, I'm Malvine. I am married to Sanjeev. We have 3 daughters, aged between 12 and 17. I'm a GP. I was a locum GP before lockdown, have been for the last 3 years. Just before lockdown, our lodger became unwell, so I ended up having to go into isolation, and the place where I was working ended my contract because things have changed so much in the NHS and there's just very little work at the moment for locum GPs. So I've been a housewife.
So thank you. Thank you all of you just for sharing honestly about the challenges, the good bits, the not so good bits. It sounds like all of you are juggling a lot of different things at the moment. We really felt it was important for us to spend some time recognising and acknowledging how it's been for each one of us up to this point. And so Rachel is going to lead us in a time of reflection. Thanks, Rachel.
So yeah, if we just take it as a bit of a prayer, but very much about how it's been for you, not about how it's been for anyone else, you know, just how each step has felt for you and for those around you and how you're feeling. So as I said, if you just close your eyes or just be in a sort of atmosphere of prayer, and I'll just read through this. So first, I'd like us to just take a moment, think back to when COVID began to appear in the news. We saw coverage of lockdown in China as things were starting to emerge, as it came towards Europe and started to appear in different countries, and then as the first cases were confirmed in the UK. Just have a think back to your initial thoughts and feelings at that time as we became aware of this, of COVID, and what its implications were for different countries. So just take a moment to think through that time right at the start of the year. And then as we saw numbers begin to grow, as vulnerable groups were asked to shield, we had the first UK deaths announced. We saw supermarket shelves being emptied, and it was officially labelled a pandemic. Take a moment to think back to its impact on you at that point. Maybe you were working more from home. Maybe you were avoiding public transport, struggling to get the groceries, the food that you needed, concern for loved ones, concern whether to see loved ones, unsure whether children should be in school still. Just take a moment to think through that time. And then as lockdown began, we all had to see rapid changes to our lives, adapting to social distancing, rare trips out of the house, if any, queues for food shopping, cases increasing rapidly around us, news overload, possible furlough for some, applying for government help for others, more people at home throughout the day. Our daily and our weekly rhythms of the things we do, places we go, activities we participate, and who we see, all changed in an instant. Take a moment to think back to that time and just how it felt for you as lockdown took hold. And then as the days slipped into weeks, take a moment to reflect on how you felt during lockdown. Days of feeling well and positive, as well as days where energy was lacking, spirits were low, and perhaps the outside world felt a threatening place to be. With limited virtual or no contact, we missed friends and family, especially acute for those who are living alone. For some, we've lost family members without being able to say a proper goodbye or surround ourselves with those who've also experienced that loss. Let's take a moment now to offer prayer in particular for those who've experienced loss of a loved one during this time. It's also good to take some time to remember our own and others' plans that have been lost or delayed. For those who've been unable to work, those who were unable to sit exams they'd been preparing for, those unable to celebrate the end of school or university as planned. For those who've had to delay weddings or have been unable to celebrate births in person. For those who have had treatment or operations delayed. Again, let's take a moment to acknowledge our own lost plans and those of others we know. Looking forward, we may be feeling many different emotions about lockdown easing. Anxious for what comes next, excited to have some things back to being more normal, frustrated at things that won't be for some time to come. Let's again just take a moment to offer our thoughts and our feelings to God, knowing He is with us, beside us every day, whatever the future holds. But bring all your feelings and thoughts to God now. Father, thank you that you have been with us every step of this year. However concerning, worried, anxious, happy, joyful, everything we've been through, you have been with us. You are unchanging, as we heard this morning, and that is true going forward into the next few months, whatever they hold. Lord, we thank you that you're a God who loves each one of us individually, knowing how each of us feels, knowing our particular situation, knowing what we have been through. Lord, we trust you now and we walk with you now. Help us keep our eyes fixed on you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
That was good. So now we want to start to shift the focus and start looking forward. With the gradual ease of restrictions, the current transition out of lockdown is going to bring new challenges for us. Some of us are going to be raring to go and wanting to crack on with making the most of all the new available freedoms that we have. And some of us may be a whole lot more reticent about stepping out, and all sorts of feelings starting to arise. So how do we navigate this new phase of our lives, what some people are calling the new normal? Transition in nature can feel more complex. Rules can be less clear. You've got more decision making to do. So how do we cope with all this sort of new uncharted territory? So we're now going to have a time when I'm going to sort of ask each of our panel members for their thoughts about ways we can look after ourselves in these coming weeks and months ahead. So just a little reminder, you can start, you know, when we start talking, do feel free to start putting in questions to the chat option. Okay, so actually, sorry, Rachel, I'm going to come straight back to you.
That's fine.
But we'd just really like to start with you, really, looking at some of the sort of psychological aspects of looking after ourselves and approaches as we're moving into transition.
Okay, no problem. So I've just made a few notes about 4 different things that it would be good to just be aware of, be thinking about, and be taking care of ourselves on in terms of our well-being, our mental health, as we kind of transition out of lockdown. So the first thing I kind of want to say is that lockdown would be considered a traumatic event psychologically. We've been living with chronic uncertainty, isolated from friends and family, and many people have been facing financial and work difficulties. So when we go through something like this, and this is unusual because in a sense everybody's been through a version of it, with traumatic events usually that's not the case. So I think we're going to have that sense of all coming out of something together. But what's really important to recognize in that is that it'll take time to recover. It won't be instant. We do need to kind of give ourselves that chance to come through it, to work through what we've been through, and maybe some of the anxiety around easing lockdown won't be quick to get over. But people will need different amounts of time to recover, and they will also go through recovery in a different way. So in a sense, the first thing I kind of want to say is that actually we're not all going to come through this together. We're going to go through it in the same way. We are all different. We have different personalities, which means that we will respond to different aspects of this differently, and that's okay. But what is really important is that we're gentle with ourselves, what we expect of ourselves, and also what we expect of others, because other people won't be going through it the same way we will be. The second thing I want to just mention is about the impact of distancing. So for many months now, we've been encouraged to socially distance, to avoid large gatherings, and especially that's been the case for vulnerable groups. And that in itself, just having that distancing is difficult for us, because as humans, we're not really designed to be isolated from each other and distant from each other. And you will know as well as I do that actually being close to people is incredibly reassuring for most people, and most people get a lot from that. So when we are allowed to no longer distance from those outside of our immediate family, that as well is going to take adapting And again, for some people that will be harder than others. And of course, even now, even as the 2-meter rule changes a little bit, it's still very complex. It's still kind of hard to judge how far is enough. And, you know, we've got to make judgments about that. And even trying to stay distant from other people is quite mentally taxing, because we can't just relax. We can't just relax when we do now see other people. We kind of have to be aware of, are we sort of distance enough, and what if we move around? How do we kind of keep that? So it's quite taxing on us, and to be constantly vigilant like that. So recognizing that that vigilance is quite tiring for our brains, and again, being a bit kind to ourselves. It might be harder for example, young children or those with vulnerable health conditions to transition back to a more normal way of being around each other, because depending on how we feel about that, it might feel quite threatening again. So I kind of think ideally try and think of it a little bit like an old hobby you'd be picking up again, because you wouldn't dive into the most challenging or complex activity to do with that hobby. You would take it slowly, you'd build up your confidence again. And I would suggest that we probably try and sort of take that approach in distancing, because it could be easy to underestimate what an impact that could have on us. But it's not how humans are created, and so it has quite an odd thing.
Yes, it's interesting you saying how you know, we're all different, so we will be doing this at different stages, and so we're on this high alert trying to work out, you know, what stage the person we're with is at. Are there particular phrases that we could use or say to make that easier, to try and understand where each other is at, you know, if you're not quite sure?
Yeah, I think it's really okay to be straightforward and just sort of say, you know, how are you feeling about distancing? You know, what's going to make this comfortable for you? Because actually, I think just being able to acknowledge that immediately relaxes you, because then once you know that about how each other are feeling about that, it then helps ease some of that over-vigilance, you know, because you're not quite sure what the other person's expecting. So again, we're all going to be dealing with this slightly differently. There are objective rules out there that the government are setting, but they themselves are complex, so we're all having to try and interpret those. So actually, again, it's just highlighting that even something that seems quite simple, like just distancing, is not actually a simple thing, and it's requiring a lot of thinking. And again, this is stuff we don't normally have to do, so it's an extra load on our brain, and that's not easy, because our brain is dealing with all the other things it usually does, and then this is new and added on top. And that in itself can be taxing for us. So I think just being straightforward with each other and just saying what's comfortable for you. You know, we met up with friends for a walk this afternoon, and we just, you know, we talked to each other about that we would be socially distancing. This is how we would do it. And again, that just makes it so much easier. You can just then relax and enjoy the time. Yeah. Okay, so 2 other quick things. One is about worry when we feel ill. So I'll just start with an example. A number of years ago, my youngest daughter was really poorly and ended up in hospital for a few days. And for some time, and it was quite a considerable time after that experience, she was terrified about being sick, because she was really associated being sick with ending up back in hospital with tubes up her nose and everything. So just, she was constantly panicking when she felt ill that she was going to be sick. I don't know about other people, but I'm sure if over the last few months you've had a headache or felt hot one evening or been coughing a bit, you start to worry about what it might mean and whether there's something more serious going on. And actually, I think this side of medical answers, or at least for some time to come, that's probably going to continue to be the case. We're probably going to be more concerned about what those kind of symptoms mean compared to what we would normally associate them with. And so again, being self-aware that you're likely to be overly vigilant about that will help manage that fear, but also accepting that being ill at the moment feels a bit more threatening than normal. And so again, not necessarily expecting yourself to be able to just shrug it off and not mind, because, you know, it's understandable. There's a good reason why we're being extra vigilant at the moment about our own health and our own symptoms. And then the other thing, which I actually picked up on a thing you mentioned to Malvine, actually, is about the impact on our identity. So there's been so much increased uncertainty around us for schools, for work, the wider economy, activities we're still not able to participate in, less structure to our week. How many people remember which day of the week it is at the moment? Yeah. They can all actually all impact our sense of who we are and our sense of security. So it can be particularly challenging to just think about whether some of that has showed up maybe where we've placed our security recently. I mean, it's very easy sometimes to locate our sense of self in the job we do, or what we think the world considers to give us worth. And actually, as Christians, obviously, our focus and our worth and who we are can and should be centered in God. And I think that sometimes an event like this, where things are kind of stripped away a bit more, and you know, the uncertain, the fragility of the life we lead is kind of revealed a bit more, it can be a useful moment to just take it as a positive and reflect on how we see ourselves and what really matters. And so if anyone is wondering about that, for me, Psalm 139 is my go-to about who I am and where my identity is centered and what matters. So that's just one I would flag up there. If you're going to have a little bit of a think about maybe where you've been putting your trust and where you've been putting your security, it's really normal that sometimes that just slips because we get a bit involved in what we're doing, and just to take that moment to get back to God and get back to Him being the center, that can be a real positive out of this time.
Thank you. Yes, it's as you were talking, I was getting the sense that there's a lot of sort of being self-aware and really understanding yourself, and that sounds quite tiring. So also to be able to shift that focus onto God and some truths about who He is and who we are in Him is really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on now and hear a little bit from Malvine. So Malvine, I'll let you introduce your what you want to talk about this evening.
Okay, thanks, Marion. I'd actually like to talk a little bit about food. Not just because I absolutely love food, and it seems really unspiritual to be talking about it at this church forum about well-being, but actually Jesus did do a lot of meal sharing and eating. And food is one of the things that we basically need every day. And over the past few months, I think most of us have probably changed our diet, either out of choice or necessity. Certainly, I've spoken to quite a few friends who've gained weight. And as we're coming out of lockdown, I think quite a few people are wondering about how to improve aspects of our lives generally. But that also does include looking at our weight. And I think I find it interesting. I'm not a nutritionist. I haven't been formally trained as a doctor on nutrition. In fact, there's very little of that kind of training in medicine. So I've been looking at this as a wife, as a mum personally, but also as a doctor, because there are just so many fads and gimmicks out there that promise so many things. And while they may help us to lose weight in the short term, actually they're not particularly healthy in the longer term. So that's why I just thought I'd have a quick chat about food. Now, all of us know that certain things that we eat can affect our cholesterol levels and blood pressure and risk of diabetes. But I think what I found really interesting, especially over the last year or so, is that the food that we eat actually improves our general well-being with regards to our immunity, as well as our psychological well-being as well. So with regards to our immunity and immune systems, our gut, which if we have time later we can look at later, the bacteria within it actually balance our immune system, and 70% of the cells that make up our immune system actually live in the gut wall. And with regards to our mental health, including anxiety, depression, low mood and sleep, 90% of our happy hormone, serotonin, isn't made in our brain, it's made in our guts. Although it's a neurotransmitter. And in fact, the gut contains more neurotransmitters than the brain. And other than the spinal cord and our nervous system, actually the brain has its own functioning with a nervous pathway. Also, what's really been interesting, more so in the last few years, is that what we eat affects certain our likelihood of certain cancers, dementia, and even Parkinson's disease. And I've been trained really badly in food, and I've certainly had quite a few fads in my time. And I think now I just realise that a lot of that is really tosh, and it's time to actually get to the basics of what's good and what isn't so healthy for us. And the Western diet typically is loaded with loads of processed and sweetened and artificially flavoured foods. And food choices are so based on convenience rather than nutrition. And things like obesity continues to climb, as do lots of lifestyle diseases. And it's really easy to go and see a doctor and say, look, I've got high blood pressure or high cholesterol or diabetes and so on. And actually, you know, we can pop pills, but actually a lot of preventative stuff can actually probably be much more helpful. So, as I said, a lot of our diets are highly processed, high carb, high sugar, high fat. But other countries around the world have much more wholesome, varied, natural foods and balanced portions. And I just thought it'd be good to talk about this. So firstly, I want to say that making changes to our diet isn't easy. And the stuff that I'm going to be saying now isn't about a guilt trip, because I've really struggled with this. You know, I'm 50, I'm overweight, I'm a doctor, I should know better. But actually, this is the stuff that we've been looking at as a family. You know, it's when we're busy, we have convenience of ready-made food and takeaways, and all that stuff is processed. And so it's important to make changes in a way that's actually doable and realistic to where we are in life and what we actually like doing. We shouldn't feel obliged to eat foods we don't like. But sometimes it takes a few attempts to try different foods cooked in different ways before we get used to sort of enjoying them and not just enduring them. I think my kids would say that the last few months have been quite interesting in the way that they've had to endure certain things that they wouldn't necessarily choose to eat. So I'm sure you could ask them about that later. But one of the healthiest diets in the world is actually the Mediterranean diet. There's no one thing that makes up the Mediterranean diet, but it is the sort of the concepts are thought to be the healthiest diet in the world. And what's really interesting is that the people who kind of eat in this way have the healthiest and the highest life expectancy, despite having limited medical services. So they have a much lower rate of obesity, cancers, heart disease, strokes, mental health issues. So it's not just living longer, it's living better. And that's the stuff that we've been certainly trying to embrace more in our family. So it encourages using real food, things aren't processed or ready-made so much. Changing the focus, the main focus of the main meal isn't just based on meat. So meat becomes more of a side dish. It's kind of a flavour enhancer rather than the actual main thing that we're eating. In the Mediterranean diet, truly, it's probably only eaten, red meat's probably only eaten about once a week. Lean sort of poultry and stuff, you know, eaten 3-4 times a week. There's much more emphasis on fruit, vegetables, plant-based proteins, things we're not really so used to here in the UK. Things like fish, whole grains and good fats. And plant-based proteins include foods like legumes, beans, lentils, things that we kind of think are just very boring, really. And then good fats, nuts, seeds, unsaturated fats like avocado, extra virgin olive oil, and then omega-3 fats in salmon, tuna, and sardines. The other thing is also whole grain foods, things like whole wheat pasta, bread, brown rice, quinoa, bulgur wheat. Things like frike, my kids really hate that, but frike.
Never heard of it.
It's an ancient grain. It's wheat that's really green, and it's just got loads and loads and loads of nutrients. But as I say, my kids hate it, so I've not really done much of that with me.
You've got to be realistic.
I think you do have to realise which battles are worth fighting, and not actually fighting, but it's an overall thing. So it's not just a case of one size fits all. There's no point, you know, trying to pretend that we like certain things when we don't. You know, so anyway, so that's that. So these kind of foods actually provide a lot of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, and fibre is actually really important. And good fats. I think for the last 30 or 40 years, the government and governments across the world have actually propagated the myth that fat makes us fat, whereas actually healthy fats are good for us. They fill us up, they stabilize our hunger pangs. They are high in calories, so it's about having them in moderation. But actually it's the amount of refined carbohydrates that we've been eating, especially in the West, which have, you know, things that are stripped of fibre and nutrients and are actually empty calories that we're eating. That's what's caused the obesity crisis and all those other lifestyle issues.
Okay, so Malvine, can we come back to you in a little while with the question and answer sessions, I think, to kind of unpick that, because that's quite a lot of new information for a lot of us. I think maybe you might be able to give us some helpful pointers as to how we might be able to start that. So if we come back to you for the question and answer, great. Okay. So if we could now perhaps go to Sedge. So hand in hand, food and fitness. So yes, just a couple of minutes, Sedge, if possible, on fitness.
Right. So I actually do know most people on here, and I know lots of people do exercise. So maybe if you have got your pen and paper down, maybe you can think about other people as well. So not just yourself on this then, because I know most of you do exercise. We didn't obviously know who was going to be on here, but it'd be great to help other people as well outside of here. So I pray that that's something that we can reach to others. So I've listed down a couple of things showing how exercise doesn't just change our physique, but all these other things as well. And that's what I'm just going to talk about. Some people might be running marathons, some people might not even be able to get out of a chair. So, you know, I'm going to discuss a bit of all of it. So the reasons that I've helped with, that I've thought about, as like Malvine said, the happy chemical. And when we exercise, this is released, and it plays a really good part. So, you know, running, dancing, jumping up and down, it will get us happy. So no matter what you do, whether it's 2 minutes or whether it's half an hour, get up doing something, or put some music on at home and dance while you're seated. If you feel stressed out as well, regular exercise reduces this. It raises your heart rate and releases a burst of hormone changes. And when you subject yourself to stress of the exercise, and you know, enough of the exercise, your body will eventually get better at handling the rest of life's stresses. So stress is a key one. It energizes you. We have days when we feel like we're too tired, but no matter how exhausted you are, try and muster up the willpower to still work out, because I reckon afterwards you feel so much better than you have done before. And energy again equals happiness, doesn't it? It boosts your confidence. If you don't feel good about your body, this can have a real negative effect, not only on yourself, but also your relationship, your career, your goal, your aspirations. So when you start to exercise and see your body transform, it makes you feel better about yourself, feel stronger, more independent as well, and more confidence. It eases anxiety. I definitely get that. I sometimes really panic before I'm going on to do some classes, and then afterwards I'm like, my gosh, why am I so worried? That was so good. I've just really enjoyed it. So it can really release that from anxiety. And then also, really key thing, insomnia. Those who aren't sleeping, especially with the stress time, this can staying active and exercising on a regular basis has shown to improve sleep problems. And also makes you want to get up in the morning as well. If you had a big lot of exercise the day before, you sleep well and you feel motivated to get up the next day. You could put music on, so you could start with just one track, put some music on. If somebody you know can't get up out of a seat, they can dance in their chair, or you can get up and dance around the house while you're doing your cleaning. You can go for a walk, you can listen to music, iPod. You can just have quiet time and look at God's creation out there. You can join a free class on YouTube. There's loads out there. Or you can join a community with somebody that's doing something on church or another group. You could start maybe a new hobby like tap dancing, anything. So many different types of exercise. A bike ride if you've got one, and also the 0 to 5K.
Couch to 5K. Yes.
Brilliant. Lots of people are doing that. They may be staying on the first 2 weeks. Doesn't matter. You're still doing something. So exercise, be happy and love yourself. And I'd say the next time you feel lonely, stressed or anxious, get off the sofa if you're able to. Exercise instead, because you'll feel confident, energized and calm, and you'll be healthier and a happier person in life.
Oh, thank you, Serge. It sounds wonderful. I wonder why we find it so hard. So many of us just still, a bit like the food, still find it quite a battle, even though we know it's sort of, we've got the head knowledge, but it's kind of transferring that into action. But maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. But thank you. So, okay, so finally, Stuart Weeks. A couple of minutes, Stuart, to share with us a few thoughts of.
A couple of hours would be perfect. Thank you.
A
minute. Okay, sorry. So the one thing I've learned is getting out and into transition is the way to look less like Simon Mortimer is to shave my face and my hair, and then everyone will spot the difference, which is really good, especially our kids, which is excellent.
Yes, thank you for doing that.
And also, I've got to turn around. I'm doing 5K to couch at the moment, which is probably not the way around, and we'll change that around. But I think in terms of what we are learning in our house and what we're learning in work, is a few key things. One is routine is important to us. So having a routine during the week, and anything I say, really, Marisa leads the way in our house. I follow behind. So anything I say is Marisa's doing, not mine. The good stuff, that is. The bad stuff's me. So making weekends different is important as well. So make the weeks one thing and the weekends different. So we try to we make sure, as far as possible, there's no homework done on weekends, for example. Which I know sounds odd, but kids are working a lot of the time. It's important. We also found the benefit, and James may still be on the call, of a weekly call with the Morgans for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, closely followed by a game of bingo with no money exchanging hands with my parents, or another game. And that's been quite fun. That's been really good. And recently, Marisa's instilled on the kids something of a step challenge, so 10,000 steps a day and reading 5 pages of a book every day. Now, we've got a chart on our wall in the kitchen, and everyone's ticking away, and my boxes are fairly empty because I don't manage 10,000 steps normally, and 5 pages is quite a struggle. But I opted in that. I thought I'd never read the Bible cover to cover. I'm 50 and a half almost, and I've never read the Bible cover to cover. I know there's better ways to do it, but I'm reading cover to cover, and I'm struggling through Leviticus, but it's cover to cover, and we'll get through it. Second thing is relationships with God, neighbours, and everything. And I found, and there's some CBS members on here, and I'm a sort of hanger-on CBS member for a Friday evening. I've tried to get along as much as I can. The switch to Zoom I found really difficult on a Friday evening, and I'm being open about that. I find it very difficult on a Friday night to do a Zoom call, because I've Zoomed and whatever else you've got going on video conferencing through the whole week. So Friday night I find difficult, but I value the small group. And a challenge to me is how to engage in a small group culture when we may still be transitioning away and using video conferencing as a challenge to me, and maybe to others. And praying. Have I found prayer increase or decrease? I don't know, but I think it's essential to dealing with the everyday and dealing with people at work. And the last two things really quickly: being aware that people will react differently, and that's okay. It sort of ties into what Rachel said earlier. And I see that at work. People are in different situations, and they will react differently to coming out of lockdown, and that's okay, and helping them. And my last thing is exercise is so important to me. Cycling, I've cycled with one member on this call. I won't stitch them up just in case I don't want to be recognised, Chris. And social distance cycling, really good fun. And we've got a WhatsApp group for men. It's actually blokes who are cycling in the church, and it's great to connect with different blokes on cycling. It's really cool. So there's a few things. Sorry.
That is a few things. That sounds like it's a huge mix of things that you're juggling, and it sounds like you have quite organised approach to quite a bit of it. I mean, just hearing about the families and the tick boxes, but I mean, I think it's helpful to see that actually different approaches for different people, and it's good to hear what works for different people in different parts of their lives, and maybe you're saying you're not organised like that in other areas, but certainly even planning things into your life to make sure those weekends feel different. And yeah, there's some good ideas that I hadn't thought of before, so thank you for sharing that. So we're going to move into a time of asking the panel a few questions. So I've got one here, and I'm going to perhaps if I could ask Mulveen this one. So we've been asked, how can our experience of lockdown enhance how we minister to people who are stuck at home, who are, you know, whether that's due to being at home because they're shielding, or long-term sickness or disability, or due to being elderly and unable to get out. So how would our experience of lockdown help how we minister to those around us who are housebound?
I think by coming alongside people and being honest, as we've said tonight, that we're in St Jeeves at Yeldall. Someone at St Jeeves Work said that we're in the same storm, but we're in different boats.
Yeah.
And we've actually found that very helpful at home to understand that actually we're all in the same storm, but we are in different boats. And I think ministering is about having those honest and real conversations with people, and drawing alongside, and being vulnerable and real and authentic about where we're at, acknowledging that actually we may all have very different experiences. And being intentional.
Okay, yes. I mean, I think even just hearing the four of you share this evening about some of those struggles, you know, it's affirming to people, and it's relationship building to hear that when people make themselves vulnerable. It's a good basis, isn't it, for relationship building. So thank you for that. Do any of the other members of the panel have anything they'd like to add to that, or should we move on?
The only thing I would say is that, you know, somebody who's housebound, this has been even more intense. You know, maybe they haven't been able to have people come who would normally come to visit them, so this might have been just the most dull, the most difficult kind of sense of loneliness, you know. So I think kind of thinking through that and asking them how it's been for them, encouraging them to use their words, maybe saying how it's been for you first, as you said, to kind of highlight that, you know, it's the ups and downs, it's okay to say that, but I think the loneliness and understanding that kind of loneliness, at least understanding that that's probably what it's been like for them, is really important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And before I ask the next question, just to remind folks, if you want to write a question, you just use that chat function and send it to Wycliffe Baptist Church. Okay, actually, Mulveen, I felt like we were sort of just starting. We heard a lot about the kind of the good stuff that we could be doing with our diet. Could you, I mean, one of the things I often think as soon as people start talking about foods like that is that it is naturally much more expensive. And that it's going to be a really expensive diet of lots of extra virgin olive oil and masses of fresh olives, and, you know, so often for me there is a bit of a financial sort of and also the other part to that is where could we, you know, you talked about the these new ways of eating, how could we find out how to do them, you know, cook them?
Yeah, okay. I think if you actually stop and think about how much we can spend on processed food and ready-made food, it actually costs quite a lot if you tot it all up. And also the other thing that's quite interesting is that actually processed food isn't quite as filling. In fact, it's not as filling. So it's metabolized much more quickly. Whereas real and wholesome food, things like whole grains and oils, good oils and so on, actually take a lot longer to be metabolized by the body. The other thing is a lot of the Mediterranean diet is going away from meat. Meat is actually much more expensive than things like pulses and beans, especially the dried stuff. You know, yesterday I used up 500 grams of dried chickpeas and pressure cooked it with quite a few vegetables. And I totted up how much that cost. And it cost less than £5, and it will feed us, you know, sort of twice, 6 of us, twice at least.
Okay.
So it's actually, vegetables are really cheap, you know, canned tomatoes are pretty cheap. The other thing is also it's much more sustainable. So yes, you know, you've got things like fish, oily fish and so on. I tend to buy it when it's on offer and then stick it in the freezer. And again, things like olive oil, they keep. So I buy them when they're on offer and then keep them in a cupboard. So it doesn't have to be expensive. And genuinely, actually, as I said, beans and pulses, lentils are dead cheap. Vegetables are dead cheap.
So where can we go to?
Where can we go?
Recipes or, you know, ideas of what to do with it?
There are loads of things online, actually. The other thing that I've actually really enjoyed doing as well is Googling things like chickpea recipes, just putting that into Google and finding lots of things on BBC Good Food and Olive Magazine. Very simple. They use, you know, they're not using millions and millions of ingredients because I'm not that kind of a cook, and it's not sort of nouvelle cuisine. This is really good, wholesome, good food. And those are the sorts of resources. Sedge has got a really helpful blog as well, and she sent us some recipes to look at. I'm sure, Sedge, we talked about making that available for people who want to have a look at those sorts of things as a starter.
Thank you. So very practical advice there. Thank you. I think we're running out of time a bit. So I think I'm just going to ask one more question just on the general, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms. Rachel, could I ask you, if someone's feeling as if they really feel like they're not coping, and they're seeing other people seem to be coping really well compared to them, you know, what can we do about that when we're feeling like we're going under a bit with it all, and others don't seem to be?
So I would say 2 things. One is that it's really, really normal, in fact, almost inevitable, that everybody will have days where they feel low during this kind of a time. Most people have a slump day about every 3 weeks. That's like kind of been researched about that kind of thing. So there'll just be a day where you might just feel a bit rubbish and everything just feels a bit heavier. And so understanding that everybody probably is having those days. I've had those days. Everyone I've spoken to has had those days where everything just feels a bit rubbish compared to other days when you can get on with things a bit more. And actually, you know, some days you feel like, yeah, I can do this. And then other days you just feel like you can't do another day of it. That's normal. That's, you know, so even though everybody who you're seeing or on TV or on social media and stuff seems to be doing really well and seems to be great all the time, chances are they're having their slump days too. If it's more than that, if you're staying there, then I would say reach out. I would say reach out to friends. Just say, I'm really struggling here. Or, you know, reach out to an elder from church. There's the prayer group at church. Paul or one of the other pastors, you know, but I think seek support, you know, share that, because again, we're distant, we're more isolated. Some of that natural unloading that we would be doing, we're probably not doing in the same way. So we're probably carrying a bit more than we normally do. So I think sharing it and reaching out. But I would want to absolutely stress that I don't know if anybody is enjoying this. Or there are good things. It's not that there's nothing good, there is, but this is a difficult time and we can find good things in it. But let's not fool ourselves. This is really hard, and this has been hopefully a once in a lifetime experience. I've never experienced anything like this. Hopefully never will again. But it's just recognizing that in itself can help, because people will cope in different ways. People have different personalities, but share.
Yeah, thank you. And just really to go on to the back of that with what you're saying about sharing with others and the people that you can share with, we have there are a huge number of organisations. So if there are specific areas in your life that you're really struggling with at the moment, there are a huge number of support agencies, and we can help put you in contact with agencies that could help you with your, and we've put some of those into the Wycliffe newsletter this week. So some of those are on there: talking therapies, communicare, but there's a number on there of the contact details. And again, like Rachel has said, do feel free to reach out to those of us who have been involved this evening, or the eldership. So we want to just prior to going into our breakout rooms for a little bit of opportunity to share together, I just want to we've had a lot of information, and I just kind of want to sort of steady our thoughts a little bit just as we go into a time together. And so I just want to read actually the psalm that was read this morning in church, Psalm 121. Just to remind us that in all this new information, all these changes, that God is unchanging. So I'm just going to read Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now and forevermore.